In this lesson, we'll examine the Eastern worldview. In previous lessons, we took a look at the Christian narrative. The world is an artifact. And we'll have a different metaphor for the Eastern worldview. But let's just recap what the Christian worldview entailed. The idea was that God created the earth and all the living things. In a sense, living things were put into this universe by God. They were designed and created. The world was populated by living things, and God stands, in a sense, outside of nature. We learned about the parallel lines of ancestry. The special creation hypothesis suggested that God made each species in a separate act of creation at some time in the past, and they have never changed since the time of creation. Now, for the Eastern view, we're going to mix things up a little bit. So we're going to add a few things and subtract a few things. And we've got a cat here instead of the chimp. We've got a human. We've got some trees, and we have some rocks and things, and we'll have God here. But now we're going to see there's a different relationship between God and all of the things in existence. So for the Eastern worldview, we're going to depict it with this image. The dominant metaphor for the Eastern view: the world is a drama. In our picture, we have God as a puppet master. That's another metaphor. And on the strings here, we see all the different things in the world. We have living things, we have animals like humans and cats, we have trees that are living, and we have non-living things as well. The idea is that God is performing these different roles. So a human is one role that God is performing. Trees are performances by God as well. God performs the role of rocks. God performs the role of cats, which means everything, everybody is God. Now, we walk around the world and we say, well, I'm a human and that's a tree and I'm not the tree. But in this view, God is simply playing two different roles. We think we're different, but we are being performed by the same divine entity. So everything in the world is a performance by God. Now, this view is challenging for Westerners. So again, the notion is that God is sort of the director and the performer of all of the parts. But this poses a challenge, because let's consider this individual right here, this human right here. We're going to see this human has some interesting characteristics. Let's say that that human was none other than Hitler. Now, in the Eastern view then, if all things are performances by God, then it means that God was also performing the role of Hitler. Now, why in the world would God play the role of such an individual? Well, we can just kind of speculate, but perhaps, having the role of Hitler makes the story more interesting. So in other words, good stories in literature, they usually have a protagonist and an antagonist, and there's got to be some kind of conflict, etc. And so perhaps God, to make an interesting story, has to be performing roles that we would identify as having negative qualities, evil, if you will. So, again, the metaphor for the Eastern view: the world is a drama where God is performing all of the roles. Now, Westerners distinguish between good and bad and associate God with the good only. And this is the challenging thing for Westerners, because they don't want to see individuals like Hitler as having anything to do with God. But in the Eastern view, good and bad are just different aspects of the one divine entity. God is not separate from the bad that we think we see in the world. These are challenging ideas for Westerners, but very interesting ideas nonetheless.